Hi, welcome to Angels of Death. Today we will be covering the tragic case of Michelle Carter and Conrad Roy. This story begins with Conrad Roy III, who was a young teenager from Massachusetts. He was an honor roll student who enjoyed rowing and baseball, but unfortunately faced many mental health issues such as depression and social anxiety. In 2012, he was on a family holiday in Florida, where he became acquainted with a girl of his own age known as Michelle Carter. Michelle was a young girl who had also struggled with mental health issues such as depression and an eating disorder. A romantic relationship quickly blossomed between the two, where they bonded over their shared struggles. The two realized they only lived an hour apart from each other, so they chose to keep in contact via text messaging for 2 years after meeting. Conrad was very open about his unfortunate suicidal tendencies and had already had a failed suicide attempt the year of 2012. This was an indicator of how extremely toxic and unhealthy this tragic romance became. The pair confided in each other with all their personal issues and were extremely vulnerable with one another. Michelle Carter was a very lonely individual. She had very few friends, and those who she did spend time with had a tendency to exclude her from most activities outside of school. Michelle craved attention from her classmates and was constantly looking for ways to impress them. The romantic relationship between Roy and Carter, which essentially took place over texts and emails, was mainly a discussion of suicide and anxieties the two had. Conrad's constant mentioning of suicidal ideations and feelings began to give Michelle an idea of how she could win over the love and attention of those around her. Michelle was clearly desperate to have some form of notoriety, and she clearly had an aspiration of being the grieving girlfriend whose boyfriend had passed away from suicide. Eventually, Michelle began to become very persuasive and encouraging of Conrad's desire to end his own life. She would send him texts with various methods he could go about killing himself, such as, "Why don't you just drink bleach?" or "Hang yourself." Michelle very clearly was manipulating Conrad to act on his suicidal tendencies, which is evident from the messages seen. One night, Conrad had made plans to give himself carbon monoxide poisoning in his truck in the dark corner of a car park. He was in the midst of carrying out his own death when he had second thoughts and jumped out of the car. At this time, he was speaking on the phone with Michelle Carter, who instructed him to get back in the car, in which he did, and passed away shortly after. In the months following Conrad's death, Michelle used his passing to gain sympathy of her friends and others who finally were paying her attention for the first time in her life. Michelle organized events for mental health awareness in Conrad's honor without anyone knowing of the hand she had in his death. Eventually, the police force had the idea to check Michelle Carter's phone and was able to retrieve all the deleted messages of the conversation between herself and Conrad. Michelle was charged with involuntary manslaughter when police read messages Michelle had sent where she admitted she demanded Conrad to get back in his car and finish the job. Eventually, Michelle was found guilty of manslaughter and was initially sentenced to 2.5 years in prison, but ended up being sentenced to just 15 months. Recently, Michelle has been released from prison after only serving 11 months and released early on the basis of good behavior. This is the newest update on Michelle Carter and where this tragic tale finally comes to an end. Thank you so much for watching. Please tune in next time for more true crime cases